Tonight at 10, Rishi Sunak puts tax cuts at the centre of the Conservative election manifesto. Will it be enough to turn things around? He pledged another cut in national insurance, the eventual scrapping of the tax for the self-employed and help for first-time buyers. He also made this admission.
I'm not blind to the fact that people are frustrated with our party and frustrated with me. Things have not always been easy and we have not got everything right. But we are the only party in this election with the big ideas to make our country a better place to live.
We'll be looking at the political challenges with Chris Mason and at whether the figures add up with Faisal Islam, also tonight. President Biden's son Hunter is found guilty by a court in the US of lying about his drug use when buying a gun in 2018.
Hunter Biden was addicted to crack cocaine when he purchased that revolver. Today, he's the first child of a sitting president to be convicted of a crime.
And England limber up in Germany ahead of the start of their Euros campaign.
On BBC London, Mind the Gap, another Elizabeth Line passenger tells us he was seriously injured trying to board a train and is now considering legal action.
Good evening. The big challenge for a Conservative Party trailing badly in the polls is how to persuade voters to give them another 5 years in power. Well, today we got their answer as they put tax cuts at the heart of their manifesto. Among the policies announced was a 2p cut in national insurance and also the scrapping of the main rate of national insurance for the self-employed. They pledged a new Help to Buy scheme and also that they'd abolish stamp duty for first-time buyers on properties up to £425,000. Well, in a minute, we'll get the latest from our economics editor, Faisal Islam, on how the Conservatives plan to fund these commitments. But first, here's Chris Mason, who was at Silverstone Circuit for the manifesto launch.
Halfway through this election race, it's the moment for the cardboard boxes. Within them, those bundles of promises, not always kept, that set out a party's blueprint for the next 5 years. So the manifesto is here, so is the cabinet, then the Prime Minister. Music, applause and ovation from party supporters, yes, but also this, a candid acknowledgement from Rishi Sunak about how you may feel about him and the Conservatives.
I'm not blind to the fact that people are frustrated with our party and frustrated with me. Things have not always been easy and we have not got everything right. But we are the only party in this election with the big ideas to make our country a better place to live.
A central theme of this manifesto is tax cuts, including a promise of another 2p cut in employee national insurance.
By 2027, we will have halved national insurance to 6%. That is a tax cut, my friends, worth £1,300 to the average worker.
Rishi Sunak praised the enterprise and risk-taking of the self-employed and said this.
In the next Parliament, we will scrap entirely the main rate of self-employed national insurance.
And having acknowledged on BBC Panorama last night that it's become harder to buy a home in recent years, the Prime Minister said he wanted to make it easier.
For the first-time buyers purchasing a home up to £425,000, we will abolish stamp duty entirely.
Stamp duty is a tax on buying a home in England and Northern Ireland. Next, what about the plan to send some migrants to Rwanda? Some Conservatives say it's time the UK left the European Convention on Human Rights, or ECHR, to make this easier. But Mr Sunak stopped short of saying that.
If we are forced to choose between our security and the jurisdiction of a foreign court, including the ECHR, we will always choose our nation's security.
For much of the last 18 months, you've tried everything to try and revive Conservative fortunes, and not much appears to have worked. Could we rename this document today your Last Chance Saloon?
Well, Chris, I've been very clear when I got this job. We'd been through a very difficult time as a country. If you want a secure future, if you want lower taxes, if you want your pensions protected, if you want a more sensible approach to net zero and you want your border secure, vote Conservative at this election.
And there ended perhaps this man's last big set-piece moment to change his fortunes. Time then to scuttle through the crowds and talk to some cabinet ministers.
What do you make of that?
I think this is a really exciting manifesto for the future. And what I love about it is that it addresses every stage of our lives.
Mr Gove, if this is the game changer, why are you standing down?
Me? Well, I'm an old warhorse who's being put out to grass because we need a new generation to support the Prime Minister in the future.
It's a fudgerama, isn't it, on the European Convention of Human Rights?
If there's a contradiction between an adjudication in a foreign court and our ability to protect our borders, we protect our borders.
You're going to win?
This is absolutely in our grasp. I know we're behind in the polls.
I notice you're not saying yes.
Well, look, it's an election, and there's, I can't predict the outcome of an election. That's not my job.
The outcome of the election is your job at home. The cases the different parties are making are becoming clearer. Chris Mason, BBC News at Silverstone.
Well, the Conservatives are insistent that their sums do add up. But after a significant tax-raising parliament, they're now trying to convince voters that things will change. But how will they pay for any tax cuts? Our economics editor Faisal Islam has been taking a look.
The manifesto is a £20 billion a year change to tax and spending designed to communicate really one thing. The Conservatives want voters to trust them that taxes can now be lowered after an increase in tax and the size of government since the pandemic. Let's take a look at how they say it all adds up. The big three tax cuts first. That further 2% cut to national insurance, essentially a tax on work. 1% next April, another in 2027, adding up to a £10 billion giveaway. Then a smaller cut from the abolition of self-employed national insurance, and about the same again from some state pensioners' tax bills. This is how they're funded. Essentially, two crackdowns on tax avoidance and welfare saving, £18 billion. Let's take that £12 billion on welfare. The Conservatives describe an agenda for dealing with the challenge, not going ahead with a massive post-pandemic rise in benefits for working households. Could you raise many billions? Yes, but it's not a detailed plan. We don't know the specific policies and so those who are affected. So put that in a chart, a total £17 billion of tax cuts giveaway over there. The biggest element, cuts to national insurance worth £450 a year in a couple of years, balanced by what the Conservatives assert they can raise from an £18 billion double crackdown. But the tax cuts over there are certain in cost and impact. The savings to fund them, rather less so.
All of the money to pay from that comes from quite uncertain things. Tax avoidance, cutting civil service jobs, efficiencies in quangos, cutting welfare spending without definite plans. So we've got definite promises of goodies, of giveaways, with very uncertain ways of actually funding those promises.
Now, all of this doesn't include some already announced policies of similar size. A bumper income tax hike from the ongoing freeze in the starting levels for tax, the thresholds. Also, an implied real cut to some government departments, like courts and councils. This manifesto is basically asking voters to trust that now the crises are over, the Conservatives can, will and want to shrink the welfare bill and the size of government in order to afford specific tax cuts, or rather, to give back some part of the recent rise in tax bills.
Faisal Islam there. So how is the Conservative manifesto going down in the party's heartlands? Well, Aldershot is usually a safe Conservative seat in Hampshire. It's returned a Conservative MP to Westminster for over a century. It is low on Labour's target list, but Labour took control of the council that covers the area in the May local elections, and now they're actively campaigning there. Dan Johnson has spent the day in the town.
Who do you think should serve? David's always opted for Conservative Prime Ministers.
Now, security also means a security of knowing that you will have dignity in retirement.
So the promise of a tax cut for pensioners, do you like the sound of that, David?
I'm blessed with enough that it won't make significant difference to me, but for many it will be a great help, yes.
Do you think you're any more likely to vote for Rishi Sunak this time, having heard what he's had to say?
Not more likely at this stage. I have to hear what others offer and mull over the real meaning of what Rishi Sunak is saying before deciding.
A growing town means GPs under pressure. Neman spent his lunchtime reading the Tory pledges.
What do you think of what you've read?
I think there's two things that I like and grab my attention. I'm really pleased that he's still planning to put the vaping ban into place. And secondly, he's talking about IT. My current IT in this surgery is not up to standard.
Have you heard enough to make you vote Conservative?
Sadly, no.
This is a military town with a Conservative tradition, but all sorts of things in Aldershot are changing and political loyalties are shifting too. So much so that Labour could now have a chance here in a seat that's been Conservative for over 100 years. They're supposed to be changing the stamp duty in hope of making it easier to buy a house.
That would be a very big deal actually, because I'd love to get on the property ladder. Renting's not great. So having my own place would be lovely, yeah.
Would that sway your vote?
Probably, yeah, actually, because it's within my interests.
I just know I'm not going to vote Conservatives.
Whatever they say in their manifesto?
Yeah.
You've already made your mind up?
Yeah.
Can I ask how and why?
I just don't really think that it's going very well at the moment, and I feel like we need a change.
Sharon's living with Parkinson's and feels she hasn't heard her priorities reflected.
Make our streets safe and make our roads safe and the potholes filled in and all the little things that are making our country look untidy. There's been nobody strong enough, in my opinion, in the Conservatives to govern our country.
So will you vote Labour this time?
Yes, or Reform, can't decide.
More parties are making promises and marking turf.
Just past mine.
In this contest, we'll all decide. Dan Johnson, BBC News, Aldershot.
And there is a full list of the candidates standing in the general election there, which is available on the BBC News website. So let's talk now to Chris Mason again. Chris, there are some big promises in the Conservatives' manifesto, but is there anything game-changing?
Well, the Conservatives need something game-changing. As you say, the question is whether these 76 pages can offer that, or whether it would be realistic that any one thing could offer that. The controlling thought in this manifesto, Rita, is tax cuts. And we've heard, haven't we, about the national insurance and the stamp duty, but there's nothing in here about inheritance tax or about income tax, which plenty of Conservatives would have loved to have seen. Also on the whole question of Rwanda and small boats, there's a commitment to the Rwanda policy, but not withdrawal from the European Convention on Human Rights. And what strikes me, just when you take those two examples, is this is a manifesto very much in Rishi Sunak's image. It's Sunakian conservatism. Now, his supporters would say that is pragmatic and it's deliverable and it's thought through. His critics within the party whispered that it's not bold enough, that it isn't game-changing enough at just the time that they would say that that is desperately needed. One senior Conservative texted me today saying, doubt it'll make any difference. And there's another thing I've noticed today, both in the room but also in Conservative adverts. There's an undercurrent now to Conservative utterances that matches what I've been hearing in private for a long time, which is an acknowledgement of the possibility, even the likelihood of defeat. It's a framing that acknowledges that, yes, Conservatives, of course, want to keep on campaigning for as long as they can, trying to maximise the Conservative vote, but that might mean trying to minimise Labour's victory rather than prevent it. But, I should emphasise, 3 weeks down, 3 weeks to go.
OK, thank you very much. Chris Mason, of course. Well, elsewhere on the campaign trail today, a man has been arrested after objects were thrown at Nigel Farage in Barnsley. The leader of Reform UK was on top of a bus and he's posted a video of the incident online. Police say that a 28-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of a public order offence. Labour is promising to create 100,000 extra dental appointments for children in a bid to clear backlogs in England. The new appointments would be for urgent and emergency care and on evenings and weekends. Access to an NHS dentist has become increasingly difficult in many areas, with tooth decay the most common reason for children aged 5 to 9 being admitted to hospital. And the Liberal Democrats are calling for a new rural GP fund to support doctors' surgeries around the country. They say it would form part of a package of measures worth £1 billion aimed at improving medical services and giving patients a legal right to see a GP within a week. Well, with pressures on the NHS a key part of voters' concerns, our social affairs correspondent Michael Buchanan has been to Telford in Shropshire to see the struggle that people are having to see their doctor. It's the final report in his series on the challenges facing public services in that town.
I'll tell you, 80 years of practice.
In this supported living complex are people who for decades lauded the NHS. Tell me about the doctor.
The doctors? Well, do they exist, I ask? You just can't get them.
Brenda is a forceful 90-year-old who's had some problems with her eyes.
I got timed out twice this week on the telephone, never did speak to them. And it's just, it's heartbreaking to try to get on. You're afraid to be ill.
I've went over to the receptionist over the road and they said, we're not making appointments. So I said, what do I have to do then to get one? She said, ring up at 8 o'clock in the morning and get one. So I rang up the following morning. Nothing happened. They said, no, they haven't got any appointments. So it's 5 years since I've been to the doctor for anything, and I still can't get one.
Not far at all. I mean, it's just here.
Adding to their frustration is that the GP surgery is less than 100 metres from their living quarters. The surgery is, however, part of a group of practices, so patients can be sent anywhere in Telford, if they can get an appointment, that is.
Good afternoon, you're through to Teldoc. You are caller number 23 in the queue.
Caller number 46 in the queue. Call queues are currently at capacity. We are not able to present your call to be answered. Call back at another time.
I had a case this morning, an 86-year-old lady. We've been trying to get an appointment for the doctors for over a week now.
Julie Vernon spends her days travelling, visiting elderly clients who need help with everyday tasks, such as shopping, and repeatedly getting doctor's appointments.
We phoned the GP again this morning at 8 o'clock, and no, fully booked. Asked to phone 111, phoned 111. They called an ambulance out. Ambulance came out and did an assessment, and then the ambulance said she needs a GP appointment and got a one tomorrow. So that's how many services have been involved just to get a GP appointment.
The GP group called Teldoc told us that the population of Telford had grown substantially in recent years, but that funding wasn't available to expand its services. It said access to general practice is a national issue and that it appreciates its services can sometimes fall short of expectations. Good, timely healthcare is the bedrock of any society, and too often now it is simply not happening. Michael Buchanan, BBC News, Telford.
Tonight, the leaders of Scotland's 5 main political parties clashed in a special debate programme on a range of issues, from how to tackle the cost of living crisis to the problems faced by the NHS, as well as Scottish independence. Our Scotland editor James Cook was watching.
60 minutes, 5 party leaders, 1 general election that could change the country.
And 3 big topics. First, the economy.
What worries me about what lies ahead is that there's the threat of more spending cuts. Anas is not being straight with you.
I'm being straight with you,
There is going to be £18 billion of public spending cuts, and we've had enough austerity from the Tories. We don't want it imposed on us by any incoming Labour government.
So let me be straight with you, John, and let me be straight with the public as well. We will raise revenue, and we'll raise revenue by a windfall tax on the oil and gas giants, which would raise £10 billion, a measure you oppose. Read my lips. No austerity under Labour.
I've seen poverty. I've never seen anything like this. This is the worst cost of living crisis since the end of rationing. The Liberal Democrats immediately would reverse the 2-child cap on benefits.
If we look at the COVID pandemic and the war in Ukraine, there has been a massive shock to not only our domestic economy, but economies across the globe. And the government at a UK level have tried to provide some universal support and some targeted support.
It is disingenuous of Douglas Ross to pretend that times are hard. Times are not hard for the super wealthy. They've made out like bandits since COVID. Their wealth has doubled and tripled.
Tonight's second topic, the NHS.
My mother, who's 93, waited 6 hours for an ambulance.
another 2 hours outside the hospital before she was admitted. Is our NHS broken?
The NHS is run from Edinburgh, but the Scottish Government's budget is determined in part at Westminster.
That austerity, that cutting taxes for the wealthy, means you have to cut to the bone and cut again and again.
And that took us to the third topic, independence.
On the economy, on poverty, on health, on public services, are all crying out for ministerial attention, but have been starved of that because of the constitutional debate that has gripped our politics for so long.
I don't support independence. I don't support a referendum. But I can understand why so many people across Scotland were looking for an escape route from a Tory government that they thought we couldn't get rid of, or from a Labour Party that they thought couldn't win.
People are really struggling in Scotland today because of the effects of 14 years of austerity, because of Brexit and the cost of living crisis. All of those are a product of decisions taken in Westminster. All of those decisions are a product of decisions taken in Westminster.
It's not the NHS that we've been discussing today. It's not the education system. It's not carers. It's going to be independence above everything else. And Scotland will suffer as a result of that.
Audience and politicians all had plenty to say tonight. On July the 4th, it's your turn. James Cook, BBC News, Glasgow.
In the US, the president's son, Hunter Biden, has been found guilty of lying about his drug use to buy a gun illegally. The jury in the trial in Delaware convicted him on all 3 counts. He could face a maximum of 25 years in jail. Sarah Smith has been following the trial and reports now from Wilmington in the state of Delaware.
Hand in hand with his stepmother, the First Lady, as well as his wife, Hunter Biden left court a convicted felon. This trial, peppered with lurid details about his private life and previous addiction to crack cocaine, has clearly put great stress on the whole family. Joe Biden appeared after the verdict, ironically, at a gun safety event, not mentioning his son. In a statement, he said he loved Hunter and is proud of the man he is today. He then set off to travel to Delaware to be with his son this evening. During the trial, prosecutors argued that Hunter Biden had committed a crime by lying on a form about his drug use when buying a revolver in October 2018. That gun, along with remnants of crack and drug paraphernalia, were discovered in his car by his then partner Hallie Biden, who was also his sister-in-law, the widow of his brother Beau, who died of cancer 3 years earlier. Prosecutors showed video of her trying to dispose of the weapon in a dumpster, and she told the court, "I realise it was a stupid idea now, but I was panicking." "Why did you panic?" asked the prosecutor. "Because I didn't want him to hurt himself, and I didn't want my kids to find it and hurt themselves." Hunter Biden had already described his drug addiction in a book. Excerpts of the audio version, read by the author himself, were played in court.
Smoking crack cocaine every 3 days soon became smoking every 2 days, then every other day, then every hour of every day.
His defence argued that Hunter Biden wasn't using drugs around the time he bought the gun, but the jury rejected that. Donald Trump insists he was only convicted because President Biden's using the legal system to persecute his political opponent, claims that are undermined by the guilty verdict against the president's own son.
Thank you very much.
The Justice Department say they care only about the law, not politics.
No one in this country is above the law. Everyone must be accountable for their actions, even this defendant. However, Hunter Biden should be no more accountable than any other citizen convicted of this same conduct.
Hunter Biden's willful refusal to comply with...
Hunter Biden has also been investigated by Republicans in Congress who accuse him of peddling influence whilst his father was vice president. No charges have resulted from that, and attempts to impeach Joe Biden in connection with his son's business dealings have come to nothing. Now, President Biden has now arrived in Delaware, and he was greeted by Hunter Biden, his wife and his son, and they're all spending the evening in the family home here in Delaware, and it just shows you how close-knit this family is and how worried the president must be about his son. Sentencing isn't going to happen in this case for a few months. Hunter Biden could be sent to jail for these crimes, but it is very unlikely as it is his first offence. But he is still facing another criminal trial in September, this one for tax avoidance for failing to pay more than $1 million in tax. And that's going to be happening in the run-up to the presidential election in November, which is just one more thing for his father to be worrying about.
Sarah, thank you very much. Sarah Smith reporting there. And there's plenty more on that story over on BBC Two shortly with Newsnight. Here's Kirsty Walk.
Yes, Reeta, and as you have just heard, Joe Biden's son Hunter Biden is found guilty on federal gun charges. So what does this mean for the first family? And as Nigel Farage has objects thrown at him for the second time in a week, we'll ask whether we're taking the threat of violence on the campaign trail seriously. We'll have a full mop-up too of the Tory Manifesto launch here on Newsnight on BBC Two, BBC News and iPlayer at 10:30.
Thank you, Kirsty. At the European Athletics Championships in Rome, Great Britain's Daryl Neita narrowly missed out on gold tonight in the women's 200 metres final. She crossed the line in 22.50 seconds. That's just 1/100th of a second behind the winner, Mujinga Kambunji of Switzerland. Neita's silver medal came after Britain's Megan Keith won bronze in the women's 10,000 metres final. Now, England have been training for the first time since arriving in Germany ahead of the start of their Euros campaign this year. It's been almost 2 decades since the Germans hosted a major footballing tournament. So what's at stake for them? Here's our sports editor, Dan Rowan.
England hope to make a big impression here in Germany and have made a promising start. The squad, the star attraction this afternoon as they held their first training session in front of hundreds of local school children near to their Erfurt base. The last major men's tournament hosted here, the World Cup in 2006, unleashed huge national pride, showcasing a modern and unified Germany. But 18 years on, this feels a less confident country, one facing mounting economic and political uncertainty.
We're working with fans.
The man who represents 70 football fan groups across Germany is hopeful the Euros could help.
2006, the general mood was much more friendly, more open to Europe as well, not as fractured as it is now, not so many conflicts.
Can this tournament be a unifying force then?
These 4 weeks, definitely they will open a window where things are better. Yeah, football can bring people together, and this will happen in Germany as well.
Well, England will enjoy plenty of support out here in Germany, with more than 250,000 of their supporters expected to travel here during the course of this tournament, and around 40,000 expected in Gelsenkirchen on Sunday for the opening match against Serbia. But that game also presents the organisers with a challenge. Serbian football has been sanctioned over the behaviour of its fans several times in recent years, with hooliganism linked to far-right pro-Russian groups, and the local police have said they believe there is a threat of violence.
They have shared that intelligence with us.
The man in charge of the tournament today told me security was a priority.
The authorities rated that match from the start as a high-risk match. Serbia has not been in the tournament for some time, so there was as well some unknown factors. Okay, how are the two fan groups going to react? Our records do not show a high risk of clashes, but of course the match has a bit of a potential, if we are not taken care of, that it could escalate.
Germany rules the world again. Germany remains synonymous with success in the sport. A 4th World Cup in 2014, cementing its status as a footballing heavyweight.
They've gone in the first phase.
But there's been a steep decline since, with no knockout win at a major tournament for 8 years.
Especially after the last tournaments, we have to prove ourselves. But we are excited. The mood in the team is joyful. I hope we will be able to cope with this whole situation that will start on Friday.
Germany today continued preparations for their opening match against Scotland on Friday. For the hosts, plenty at stake, both on and off the pitch. Dan Rowan, BBC News, Jena.
Historians have found 8 perfectly preserved giant stone balls in Warwickshire, which they believe were catapult missiles. They've been found by English Heritage, and it's believed that they were used to attack Kenilworth Castle. Historian Will Wyeth has been telling us about them.
The larger of these stones are enormous. They're over 100 kilos, and these would have been launched by war machines 200 or 300 metres at the castle. Those ones are probably designed to attack walls and doors and towers. The smaller ones, about the size of a grapefruit kind of upwards, were probably more to attack people, whether it's archers or people mounting to fences, etc. They would have been terrifying. You know, historic sources talk about how once the King, Henry III, had set up the siege at the castle, he told his 9 war machines to fire continuously for 172 days. So it would have been kind of cinematic quality siege that these stones are part of, really.
Terrifying indeed. Time for a look at the weather with the peaceful Stav Danail. Stav.
Oh, thank you very much, Rita. Good evening to you. It hasn't felt too bad if you've been out in the strong June sunshine where you've had it, but generally temperatures have been below par for the time of year. Tomorrow looks similar as well. There will be sunny spells around, probably more than what we had today, and a few showers as well. Now, through this evening and overnight, it looks like the showers will tend to continue under the thicker cloud, eastern Scotland, eastern England, but skies clearing out west, Wales, southwest England, Northern Ireland, western Scotland. It's here where we'll see temperatures dip close to freezing in 1 or 2 sheltered locations, but these are towns and city values, so it's still a chilly night to come wherever you are. Now, this ridge of high pressure should kill off a lot of the showers through tomorrow. The winds will be lighter as well, but you'll notice that blue hue still hanging around the country. That's the Arctic air, which we had earlier in the week. So it will make it feel cooler than what we do expect this time of June. So we start off with clearer skies, some sunshine, a bit of mist and fog across western areas through tomorrow morning. A few showers across eastern areas. It looks like it'll be another day of sunshine and showers. The cloud tending to bubble up through the afternoon. Best of the sunshine always out towards the west, where we could see 17 or 18 degrees. But these are below par values at 10 to 16 degrees. We change the wind direction, though, into Thursday. Start to pick it up from the south-southwest. But a frontal system will be moving in with an area of low pressure. So central northern eastern areas starting chilly, dry, some sunshine. The clouds will increase. The wet and windy weather out west will spread its way northwards and eastwards. I think northeast Scotland, eastern England will stay dry until after dark. But despite all the cloud round, we're up to 17, maybe 18 degrees. That's because we've changed our wind direction, and it will be milder through Thursday night and beyond. But Friday, Saturday, Sunday, this area of low pressure dominates the scene. We'll see windier weather. There will be more cloud around, sunshine and showers. Some of the showers will be heavy and thundery, but it'll feel a little less cold and a bit warmer at nights. Rita.
Thank you very much, Stav. And that is tonight's BBC News at 10. Now on BBC One, it's time to join our colleagues for the news where you are. Good night.